begin. Slight amendment to the agenda. We're going to take items 8 and 9 immediately following the the Audit Scotland annual report, which is item 4. So it'll be 4, 8, 9, and then back to 5 on the agenda. Thanks.
Okay, so just to remind everybody that the meeting's being recorded and will be placed on the websites of the Partnership and Dundee City Council for public viewing. And I'll now take a roll call. Councillor Lynn.
Present.
Councillor McHugh.
Present.
Donald McPherson.
Present.
Sam Riddle.
Present.
Vicky Irons.
Yeah, present, Arlene.
Dave Berry.
Present, Arlene.
James Cotton. Diane McCulloch.
I'm here, Arlene, thank you.
Jocelyn Lyle.
Present, Arlene.
And I've had apologies from Raymond Marshall and Martin Sloan. Okay, so that takes us to item 1, which is apologies for absence, which have been noted. Item 2, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations? No. Okay. Item 3 is the minute of the previous meeting held on the 27th of September, which is submitted for approval, and the action tracker, which is also submitted.
Yeah, as usual, I'll just go through these page by page, and if anyone has any issue they want to raise in relation to the minutes, please raise your hand. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7. Can these minutes be accepted as an accurate record of a previous meeting? Yep, thank you. Action tracker. Dave.
Thanks, Ken. Just a couple of things to highlight on the action tracker kind of this time round. You see the kind of very first one, which was one that was quite an old one. We've kind of changed to green. It was a very kind of specific ask kind of way back a couple of years ago around that. We've kind of had a look at what we can do in terms of kind of providing that sort of kind of the support. I think the issue with a lot of the information around external parties is somebody needs to kind of keep that up to date, and we just don't have the resource to do it. Whereas there are kind of other resources which kind of do that. There's Scotland Services Directory, and Alice, I think, is the other one that's called, for instance. So, what we're saying is we'll actually put a link to those resources on our website so people can kind of get that connection through for that. So we're marking that down as being complete, and we'll kind of move that from from future action trackers. Excuse me. The other one I just want to highlight, and it's more kind of question back to the committee. So it's number 10 on the action tracker, and it was kind of on the back of our Care Inspectorate gradings report that we discussed last time round, and there was an ask from the committee to ask the Care Inspector to come to do a presentation. We kind of reflected on it after the meeting, and we just want to be kind of clear in terms of what the committee's ask of the Care Inspectorate would be in terms of what you would want to see in terms of that presentation, because we would need to be a bit kind of specific in terms of, is it about the grading process? Is it about an overview of gradings across the country and how Dundee fares? It's really just to kind of make sure we get the right sort of kind of message across from the Care Inspectorate. So it was really a kind of question back to committee to see what you want from that particular presentation.
Could we deal with that now then, or do we have to do that by an email?
If members have views just now, it would be helpful.
I would have thought what you just said, certainly those two, an overall view of the process, the grading process, and how Dundee compares with the rest of Scotland, maybe an overview of the last decade or so, how performance has gone up and gone down, stayed the same, whatever. Does anyone else now? Just speak up. Actually, if anyone else wants to say, and don't wait for me to call you, because I've got an order of speakers, but it's not in relation to this.
Yeah,
is everyone
the
happy?
other one.
Yeah, Donald.
Yeah. Sorry, Ken. I was just taking up that offer.
Yeah.
The other one that would be interesting. I mean, if you look at the Care Inspectorate's powers, they've got they can set conditions, they can take enforcement action, and it would be quite interesting to just understand what their escalation process is, and in what circumstances would they move from guidance to enforcement. So that would be my ask.
Yeah. Well, closure being the ultimate sanction. I'm trying to think. I think there's maybe one case that's happened in Dundee in the last 15 years, but even that might be wrong. It's certainly infrequent that they take that measure. But there are obviously measures in between doing nothing and that have been taken. Anyone else just speak out on that particular issue of what we'd expect from the Care Inspectorate?
I'm happy what you suggested, and with the addition of what Donald's added in, that would be sounds good to me if they can accommodate that.
Well, if we could just, if you have a note of that, and Dave, and we could just move forward with that action, that saves us all emailing each other. And
I think Diane needs to speak.
Yes,
Yeah.
Chair, can I come in with the Chief Social Work Officer hat on in relation to this particular issue? I do wonder internally as well. So
Sure.
while the Care Inspectorate will utilise their powers, that is usually as a position of last resort, and quite often what happens is that it's the excellent work that goes on from our staff before that would get to that position in order to then bring in the Care Inspectorate and their powers. So
Sure.
there are teams that sit in Jenny's area that are specifically dedicated to supporting care homes. Part of that is around where we might have large scale investigations. So I think I think that there are broad kind of issues in terms of what the Care Inspectorate can do, but it's probably also helpful for us just to brief you in relation to what we would be doing long before we get there. As a past head of registration and inspection, I always used to say it should be no surprise to any care service when we actually get to the position of utilising the powers, because it's usually at the end of a process, not the start of a process. So that might be a better way to deal with it, just to see if we can maybe set something up for those members of the committee who are interested in that work.
I think most of us would be. I certainly would, and especially given the majority of care homes are those for older people, and I spent 5 years working in care homes for older people. I have a real interest in that, although it was some time ago, and I probably qualify for one myself now. But yeah, really important to me. So I think, Dave, if anyone has any bright ideas they might like to email to you, when would you like them, in addition to what we've already agreed? What kind of date? End of next week or before Christmas, or?
Yeah, but probably the end of next week, and then we'll be in touch with the Care Inspectorate to kind of see what they can do, and then we'll arrange a date in the new year probably to get them over.
So that would be, yeah, that, because we wouldn't want that just to be the PAC members anyway. We'd want everyone to have the opportunity to attend that. So a standalone out with the PAC is great. So having diverged away from my order, which I'm usually quite good with, back to the action tracker, which we were discussing, and next up is Donald.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Yeah, my point was in the minutes of the last meeting, and you remember we had quite a discussion about readmission rates.
Yeah,
and I think there was a sense that we were getting a lot of data, and we were maybe getting caught up in talking about numerators and denominators, and it would actually be better to take a step back and work out what's the purpose of looking at readmission rates, and under item 3 of the minute, it's recognised that a summary report would come back to the next meeting, just to focus on what the data tells us, what we're going to do. That hasn't made it through to the action tracker, and
Right,
certainly
okay.
I couldn't see it in the paper. So I wonder if that could just be captured as an action.
Yeah, I'm just looking. You said page 3. Sorry.
It was on page 4 of the minutes, and it's that item 9, review of emergency admission rates, and there's a little Roman 3 that talks about a summary report.
Yeah, can we add that to the action tracker for the next meeting, please? And Dave's nodding his head, so thanks for that. Dorothy, you're next.
Thanks, Ken. In reference to items 1 on the action tracker, which has now marked as complete, and item 2, I think these both relate to staffing or to capacity issues. Would it be possible at some stage to get some update on where we are, what the issues are in terms of staffing, please?
This is on the action tracker, number 1.
Yes, on the action tracker, numbers 1 and 2.
I'm sorry, what was your ask for that?
An update on staffing capacity, because these are both issues with challenging staffing issues.
To be honest with you, I'm struggling to remember what the voluntary action exercise group is. Can anyone enlighten me?
Sorry, Kate, I think that was a very specific ask kind of way back. I think that the underlying point here is around the fact, so we've not managed to kind of progress that one in particular because we just don't have or to kind of sustain, public sort of information on other organisations' activities and services that are available with the resource that we have available to us within the partnership. And similarly, in terms of one of the other outstanding actions, we just don't have that capacity within our strategy and performance service to kind of do all the asks that are asked of us just now. So happy to kind of provide an overview of where we are. So Catherine and myself are kind of working through a restructure of the strategy and performance side of things at the moment. That's still ongoing just now. So kind of happy to kind of report back to the next pack in terms of, I'll do it probably with the pack actually, because it's wider than just the pack's activities. It includes the IGB in terms of where that's at and what additional capacity that will bring us, and what we can and cannot do in effect. Because as everybody knows, resources are tight. We're not going to be in a position of being able to kind of bring in resources that are going to be absolute everything that everybody asks for. It's more about what we can provide with the resource that we've got.
Thank you.
You happy with that response, Dorothy? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks. Next up is Claire, please.
It was just to say that the links to Scotland Service Directory and to Alice are on the partnership's website. They are there, so and those links have links to people's websites and up-to-date information, but we're just not able to sustain a kind of a diary type function of everyday activities that's going on across Dundee for kind of external people. But that's where the information is about all the services. We've got that link on the website.
Can anyone enlighten me as to what the voluntary action exercise group is?
It was just an exercise class that was run by
quite literally.
DVVA.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
I'm overcomplicating that in my own head. Then it's just literally an exercise group. Yeah, fair enough. I thought it was something a bit more complicated than that. Are we finished with the action tracker? I see no further hands, so I think we can move on to item 4.
Item 4 is the Audit Scotland Annual Report and Integration Joint Board Annual Accounts 2022-23, and you're asked to agree the recommendations.
Thanks for that. Very comprehensive report. Overall, I have to say I'm quite pleased with it, although there are some caveats and some areas highlighted which are of particular difficulty that there's a lot of work to be done on. Who's going to speak to this?
So Ken, I'll
yeah.
kind of do a wee introduction, and I'll pass on to Brian Howarth, who's
Okay.
our
Yep. Thank you.
who's our kind of audit manager, who will kind of take us through the audit report itself. So I'll just kind of pick up kind of first of all on the accounts themselves. So we did present the draft, the unaudited accounts to the IGB back in June earlier this year. And they were then kind of passed on to Audit Scotland to kind of undertake the audit process. So over that period, we've engaged with Audit Scotland in terms of the various aspects of the work that they do, which kind of culminates in the production of their assessment of the accounts and indeed their sort of annual report, which I'll kind of let Brian kind of talk to. Couple of things for me, just in terms of the audited accounts themselves. First, I would just kind of like to thank the finance team within the Health and Social Care Partnership for all their work in getting the accounts kind of prepared and then responding to the audit kind of queries there. It's quite a piece of work, so kind of thanks to them. I'd also like to kind of thanks in advance of the audit speaking for all the work and support that they've done over this kind of audit process. It's kind of you know, there's obviously a lot of work goes on behind the scenes here to kind of get the accounts into an audited state, and I have to say the audit team have been kind of really helpful in kind of getting us to that stage. So so thanks to Brian, Richard, and Mary in terms of the work that they've done there. I'll just kind of draw your attention to a couple of things in the accounts themselves. Again, we've kind of, it's just really kind of refreshing your memories, to be honest, because we did kind of pick some of the stuff back in June. It's been quite a time. So you'll see from the accounts that we ended the year with a deficit of £15 million. And any other year I'd be really concerned about that, but this year it was on the basis of the return of the COVID funding and the way that the accounting mechanism works for that. So we actually had an underlying operational kind of underspend over 22-23 of £7.5 million. So it was really those sort of kind of technical adjustments of both the spend and COVID, which was over £6 million, plus the return of the money back to Scottish Government from there. So if you kind of look to that without that kind of context, you might kind of think we were in a for 22-23 we had a bit of a problem. So that's a bit of the context around that. In terms of the audit itself, I'm kind of pleased to note that the accounts are unqualified, so kind of no significant changes required there. But Brian will kind of take you through the findings from the audit and also the kind of the recommendations that they've set out within the report. We've kind of agreed the audit actions and kind of timescales for response in those as well. So I'll pass on to Brian, if that's okay with you, Brian.
Sure. Just to echo what you said there, Dave, I think there's a recognition in the report that everyone worked well together in preparing this report. So thanks for that, everyone. And over to you, Brian. You're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think Dave has stolen most of my thunder there. Just to say, I'm joined by Mary O'Connor. So Mary did the majority of the work on the IGB audit. So if there's any difficult questions, I'm sure I can tap her knowledge. I just want to talk just very briefly. Our papers are all in the supplementary papers, I think, for you. There's a cover report on page 5 of the supplementary papers. That just lets you know that the audit's complete. There's also in paragraph 7 of that paper the opportunity, as there always is, for members to let us know if there's any issues that they should raise at this point before we get to the actual signing of accounts up to the date we actually sign. So you can let us know through questions if there's any issues. The accounts, subject to the approval of the committee, will be signed electronically, hopefully later today. We'd like to keep the gap between the committee and the approval and this actual physical sign, or the electronic signing, as short as possible. Our annual audit report is on page 15. Just to brush through some of the key messages. As David said, it's a clean audit certificate. The only issue we really found between the unaudited accounts you saw and the audited accounts in front of you is that there was a bit of a double counting both on the income and expenditure side. So that made no difference to the bottom line, but it was around the NHS funding and expenditures. One of the key things we always do is we always agree IGB results to the two partner bodies, and that always means that we have to do a decent amount of work in the partner bodies before we can get to sign off the IGBs. Obviously, councils are the key thing here. NHS is signed off quite early, by the end of June, but the council takes a bit longer to get through that process. But that's all okay. It's all agreed to the partner bodies. As Dave's mentioned, the deficit of 15 million, and that is very much underpinned by what Dave has said about the use of reserves and the in-year surplus. The overall reserve position has reduced because of that use of COVID reserves and the paying back to the Scottish Government through the NHS of those reserves. The only other thing probably to say is there's a projected funding gap in the current year, 6 million, and that's to be met from reserves again. It's not unusual, I think the other aspect of the report, not unusual in the IGBs across Scotland to see these workforce issues. In fact, across probably the public sector now, we're seeing this more, even greater than finances, probably as a limiting factor. You know, a lot of bodies are having to rethink what they can provide with the workforce that's available to them. So that, I think that's a key area across Scotland public sector that we're seeing, and probably one that deserves more debate in terms of what we want people to do going forward. So that's all. I'm happy to take questions, Chair, and Mary will help me out if I get stuck.
Sure. Yeah, Donald McPherson, please.
Thanks, Ken. Thank you, Brian, for the summary of the report. I just had one question, and in the key messages you got, one of them is that the IGB has appropriate and effective financial management arrangements, which is something that obviously I would expect to see. But then if I look elsewhere in the papers for today's meeting, at item 10, we've got an internal audit plan progress report. And I was just, I suppose I took a bit of an inward breath when I read the Dundee City Council report around General Ledger, which was giving limited assurance. Wondering how we as board members can style the two statements. So maybe it's maybe a combination of yourself, Brian, and Dave to comment on that, how we can still take assurance given some of the issues that are raised over the GL system.
I can start off, I suppose, with the gist of an answer to all that. I mean, you're right, internal audit found some weaknesses in the general ledger system. We also look at key controls within the general ledger systems of the partner bodies, including Dundee City Council. There were no significant issues around there, and we also undertake quite detailed substantive testing of those transactions, which didn't identify any significant material issues for the accounts. I think when we refer, we're probably quite narrow in terms of how we refer to the financial arrangements within the IGB. I suppose what we're looking at is the extent and accuracy of reporting to you as a committee and to the board around the financial position, and the scrutiny of that. Particularly, I suppose what we're looking for is whether the financial position that develops through the year is developed to you. I think where we have real problems is where an organisation doesn't know it's got a massive under or overspend until it gets to the year end. So I think that's where we think about it in terms of our assurance that we give around the financial arrangements. But we have issued an unqualified audit opinion on Dundee City Council as well. So overall, taking into account the weaknesses in some of the control areas, we're happy overall with the amounts that are presented within the accounts. I don't know whether David wants to say more. Maybe Mary might have something to chip in on that.
Yeah, so Kate, come in, Chair.
Sure.
So yeah, no, and obviously kind of Brian's described kind of that side of things and what audit kind of look at. And I think one of the, you know, you're absolutely right to kind of flag that up, Donald, because is one of the kind of key aspects of the internal audit kind of sharing protocol, where something comes up in one of the organisations that's of relevance. So, that's why it's there. That's good. That's done its job in terms of flagging up a particular issue there. I think it's back to from our perspective in terms of the extent to which those that kind of limited sort of kind of assurance impacts on what we see coming through and what we can expect to come through within the ledger. So obviously this is the kind of council's kind of the totality of the council's ledger. We will be affected by some of those issues, but not necessarily everything, particularly when it talks about things like feeder systems and the controls around feeder systems and ours. Now I know that there are kind of weaknesses within some of those. A lot of our spend is driven through our sort of kind of system, which itself has its own sort of kind of controls and management between the payroll system and the Mosaic system. The majority of our spend will go through, but there are still things that will go through other aspects of the ledger that we know are not that we have to kind of put a bit more attention to make sure they're accurate. I think in terms of a lot of the findings from the council side as well, it was more about how the ledger is then used for financial reporting as well, and how that's kind of pulled through. And we have our own kind of way of actually kind of reviewing the financial information, the work that our accountants do with the managers in terms of kind of understanding sort of spend patterns and expectations as well. So we feel we've got a kind of quite a good sense of what should be kind of going through and try and do that sort of reconciliation within that. There's not been anything that we're aware of that has an audit of obviously not kind of picked anything up as well that would significantly impact on the figures that we use, both in terms of reporting and in the actual accounts themselves.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that clearly there's that weakness in one part of the controls, but there are other controls, and you've spoken about Mosaic and other work that you do that in effect is a compensating control for that weakness, and that gives that assurance, and I'm hoping that the auditors see it that way as well. Okay, any idea when Dundee City Council will resolve the issue?
I'd need to go back and check the specific agreed action that the council is committed to on that, Donald, but I can report that back.
It does feel like something we should be keeping a track on.
Yeah, I noticed Jocelyn's hand's just gone up as probably in relation to this issue, Jocelyn.
Yes.
Yeah, can you
Thanks,
come in, please?
I don't know the answer to Donald's question as to when that will be resolved, but I guess it's just a learning point for me looking at that report where we've quite clearly stated what the issues were, but we haven't actually given you assurance that management have agreed action to address them. So I think just for future reports, we need to make sure that we're doing that. Obviously, that assurance will sit with the Dundee City Council Audit Committee, but I think it's just to say that we'll make sure in future, whenever we've got one like that, we're telling you what they've agreed as well. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Dorothy.
Thanks, Ken. I've not quite articulated this question in my head properly, so bear with me, please. And I'm not sure if it's a question for Dave or Brian. I see that the reserves are standing at 24 million and we're projecting a funding gap of over 36 million over the next 5 years. And I just panic and go, there's no money. I mean, clearly that creates a pressure on budgets and services going forward, because we'll have to keep that in mind, won't we? That we're projecting this 36 million. So I'm just a bit concerned about it. Can we manage? How are we going to manage that, Dave or Brian? How are we going to do that and not decimate services, much needed services?
So thanks for that, Dorothy. Yeah, it is a kind of very challenging position that we face. we set out that £36 million gap kind of back in June in terms of financial outlook and where we thought we were going to be, and we'll be providing an updated report on the 24-25 position as we kind of now see it to the IGB in December, and we've also have the IGB development, budget development sessions that will start in December, and we'll have sort of sessions arranged for January, February and March as well to kind of to really kind of explore that in more detail. We know it's going to be a really challenging kind of position. We'll not know until the 19th of December in terms of the Scottish Government's budget announcement what that position is really going to look like. So at the moment we're still based on a set of assumptions that are as informed as we possibly can and consistent with our partner bodies in terms of what they're assuming for things like pay awards, kind of funding levels, uplifts, or kind of flat cash, etc. So we are in the process of kind of pulling all that together to provide that overview as early as we can and as reliable as we can with the information that we've got. So in a month's time, we should have a bit more clarity on that, but then the work will probably really start sort of January, February, in terms of, us as an IGB working that through and seeing what that actually means. Without kind of going into the detail around what we where we might want to look in terms of balancing the budget, I don't think we can get away from the fact that we're going to have to use some more of the reserves into next financial year to kind of help balance that out. We are in a relatively fortunate position, if you can say that we do have some reserves left. I know a lot of IGBs across the country will exhaust their reserves this year, so we'll have a bit more to sustain us for next year. But the approach I'd always want to take is to make sure that we keep enough back to invest in transformation and support transformation for the future with the reserves that we've got, because we don't really have an opportunity to do that with anything else, because there'll not be any new funding coming for it's unlikely there'll be any new funding coming for those purposes. So yeah, I can't tell you just now how we're going to manage, but that's to come.
Thank you, Dave. I look forward to the budget development sessions in January, is it? Good, thank you.
In the shorter term, Dave, it's what, three months ago, I think, projected overspend was around 4 million. Now it's 6. Yeah, how optimistic or pessimistic are you that it'll either stay the same or reduce or increase?
So we'll have another our latest report we presented to the IGB in December. It's looking pretty steady in terms of similar position to previously, but there remains a number of kind of significant challenges around that, and obviously we're moving into the winter period. Well, we've tried to kind of factor as much as we can in terms of that uncertainty around that. Things can come at us from different angles that we haven't anticipated, but at the moment that's what we're projecting.
Okay, thanks for that. I don't see any further hands. Thanks for your contributions, Brian, Jocelyn and Mary. Can we agree the recommendations from 2.1 to 2.5? I see no objections to that, so thank you.
Thanks. So that takes us then on to item 8 on the agenda, which is quarterly complaints performance, second quarter 2023-24, and this is for noting.
Yeah, I should point out that Claire's got a very good reason to be taken first. So yeah, just the very important work later on. Claire, I'd like to go ahead and speak to item 8, please.
Yeah. So this is the quarterly complaints report, and I think it's just to say that actually the way we've presented the complaints report before has been driven by the mandatory SPSO categories that we were working to, which were quite difficult to get from the NHS, the numbers all the time. The SPSO have actually changed those categories now, so we're looking to really kind of improve the qualitative information that we're going to be giving you and change the title of the complaints report to kind of like complaint, feedback and complaints.
Yeah.
So we really want to kind of improve the quality of information that we're giving to you. And we've got some good news as well, is that we are now kind of engaged with Care Opinion to get that going forward as well. So we'll be incorporating that into this report. So just looking at kind of like the headline figures, numbers of complaints for health have slightly decreased, numbers for social work slightly increased, complaints closed. It just kind of fluctuates, but it's all staying within a kind of a manageable, what we'd expect to see. We've got an established Friday afternoon huddle with NHS complaints and feedback team to look at the complaints and actively manage them. And if we look at the number of kind of open complaints that we've got at the moment, there's 4 with social work that are quite long. The average number of days for kind of resolving an open complaint is 35 days at the moment for social work, but for health it's 13. So that's great. And as is usual, our complaint, a lot of them come from the mental health side, but those are kind of looked at very well, and there's a good established process for looking at them, and the mental health and learning disabilities team are really engaged with that process and really work with people to make sure that their complaint is resolved. So to look at kind of our future reporting format, we do want to continue with some of those SPSO categories, and we really want to kind of just focus on the qualitative information and give you more information. And with Care Opinion coming on board as well, that means that teams will be able to use that as a feedback mechanism as well to actively engage with people, with service users and patients as well. So we're really looking forward to kind of improving our qualitative information. So really not much change within complaints report, but there will be.
That's interesting to hear. Don.
Thank you, Claire. Care Opinion. This is an electronic platform, is it?
It is.
Yes. So, are there options, for people who are not electronically literate or online?
I think there will be. We support people. So when people say they want to raise an issue with us as well, they can do that to any member of staff. And we should be supporting them with that. So ideally, they should be able to go to any member of staff within the council or the NHS to say, I've got an issue, and that we should be linking them and supporting them with that. We've taken kind of taken down notes from people and put them on the systems ourselves. So I foresee that it would be kind of business as usual for that. Right. If people are able to raise an issue, then we should be able to support them.
So that there is a process for people who are not electronically literate to feed into the process.
Absolutely. If somebody said they wanted to raise an issue on Care Opinion, communicated that to us, but they didn't feel able to do that electronically, we could do that for them, which is what we've done with people wanting to make complaints but not feeling able to write it down. We can do that for them.
Okay, thank you.
I see no other hands, and I don't have any questions. I'm always a bit surprised, I suppose, given the nature of the service that we provide, that there's a bit the low number of complaints, if you like. And I look forward to the system being improved with Care Opinion, with those measures being in place for those who are not, who don't have access to the technology. You need to be to put your opinion into that new system. So thanks for that. This is just for noting.
Okay, that takes us on to item 9, which is the Strategic Risk Register update, and this is also for noting.
Anyone like to speak to this? Claire, of course, that's why I'm taking item 9 now. I saw them. Yeah,
it's me.
I'm a bit off today, aren't I?
Sorry, I've just noticed there are a couple of errors in this report as well. Just kind of slightly grammatical errors, as I'd updated it but hadn't changed. So I've said the 3 highest scoring risks on the strategic risk radar have not changed slightly. They have, in that the unable to maintain IJ or due to the budgetary outlook for 2024 to 25 in relation to anticipated public sector funding. So that is a change. We've also still working on the emergent risks that are coming or have been escalated. And these are around the property safety management issues that we've been having. So that's been in terms of getting our partner bodies to kind of ensure buildings are safe or deal with issues timely, and around capacity for our information governance. And that's to do with our capacity to complete subject access requests, which can often be very complex, and we have a lot of information and it's quite technical to get that processed safely and within time. So those are the upcoming risks. There's also, we've been speaking just recently about the Safe Staffing Act risk, so that will be coming as well. And I am still working on the risk appetite development work as well. So that hopefully I will have that capacity to do that within December, and that you will kind of get that final feedback around that for January.
Yep. Any questions on this? Can you get this done? Just a wee bit confused by the chart. There's red and then there's yellow. So what's the most up-to-date status then? Say page 95.
So page 95, the score is in red.
Right.
It's red where it's high.
Yep, sure, I know that. Yeah, but what's the status then?
It's whether it's changed. So it's amber because it hasn't changed. I know this is the chart that this is the extract that we take, and this is so it's amber because it hasn't changed. Yeah, sure, and sure. It should have been that I should have updated that. I know IJB have the unable to maintain IJB spend. You can see that the status one in that second has moved up.
Yeah, that's what
so you've got the little arrow as well, but you've also got little colour as well.
I think you can excuse yourself now, Claire, and good luck with your appointment.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
And okay. I think we might not have to have a comfort break today, the way things are going, but we'll see.
So that takes us now back to item 5 on the agenda, which is the Dundee Health and Social Care Partnership Performance Report 2023-2024, Quarter 1, and this is for noting.
Going to me for this one this morning. Apologies, Lindsay Webster, who I think you all know, is actually the person who prepares all this report and the next report, actually isn't able to be here this morning. So we will do our best to answer questions, but if there is anything that's particular around the technical aspects, I may have to just follow that up outside the meeting. So apologies for that this morning, it's been unavoidable. So in terms of this report, again, familiar to you all, I think, our regular quarterly performance report. One important change to highlight to you is that the Public Bodies Joint Work in Scotland Act requires us to report the national indicators for the current year and the preceding 5 years. So we have now updated and changed the baseline year in the reports. We'd left it at 15-16, the kind of pre-integration year, but we've now updated that to 2018-19. So that has had a bit of an impact, as you'll have seen on Table 1 and Appendix 1. Moving the baseline year has highlighted deterioration in performance across a kind of broader range of the indicators over that period, and I'll come back to that in a second. So having made that change, despite all the work we've done in readmissions is actually one of the indicators which, compared to the baseline year, our performance has been improved. And in fact, readmissions rate has been pretty stable for the last 4 years. The other area where performance has been improved from the new baseline, the 18-19 year, is around the percentage of time people spend at home in the last 6 months of their life. And obviously all the support around end-of-life care and palliative care that the partnership delivers there. Of the indicators where performance is poorer than the baseline year, we've already covered this morning inspection gradings, where we've already done some quite in-depth and analytical work around that. There's ongoing work around falls and falls improvement, and I believe there's an update paper to go to the IJB around some of the developments there when they next meet in December. And obviously you're well aware that the discharge management is reported to this committee and very, very closely monitored on an ongoing basis. Moving on then to the social care unmet needs data, you can see that despite some challenges against the national indicators, there is actually an improving position around social care unmet need and the impact that that's having around delayed discharge. The most recent position on the 13th of November around delayed discharge was that we had actually moved in Dundee to a green rag status in terms of acute delays in the acute hospital. In terms of social care unmet needs, there is also an improving picture. So the numbers of people waiting in community is for a social care assessment is at the lowest level it's been at since May this year. There's also been a steady decrease in the number of people who've been assessed and are waiting in hospital for a package of care since February. And there's been a decline since February as well in terms of people who've been assessed and are waiting in the community for packages of care. And that's at the lowest level that it has been in 12 months. And you'll see that reflected quite clearly in the charts in Appendix 2. I will leave it at that because I know that normally people have specific questions that they want to ask off the back of the paper. So I'll leave that summary there, Chair.
So I suppose in short, our performance is improving in key areas over the last year or so, but compared to the new baseline, there's an awful lot of red in there, although on the second page it's probably half and half.
Yes.
So it's it's encouraging that we are seeing improvements, but obviously when you see it compared to the 2018-29 baseline, it's a bit stark, particularly that first chart. Sam, would you like to come in, please, with your question? I think you're on mute, Sam.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's okay.
Table 3, Catherine, and bullet point 6, the percentage of people with positive experience of care at their GP practice. I wonder, how is that obtained? Is that the national survey, or is that separate surveys that are done in practices? Do you know?
That so the national indicators reported from the health and care experience survey that's administered by the Scottish Government every 2 years. And I think we've discussed here before that unfortunately, while we get a figure from that, we don't get any qualitative information that sits alongside that to understand what people's answers might mean in a little bit more detail. So it's certainly a limitation of the survey. But what I would say is obviously Julia Martineau and Shona Hyman have been doing a lot of work in terms of engagement with people around the development of primary care and GP strategies and premises issues. And we have had good qualitative feedback from those processes about what works well for patients and what they would like to see us improve as well. That's reflected back in those papers that have either been to the IJB or will be coming soon. So hopefully that'll give a wee bit more insight, Sam.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Ken.
Can I just go back to what I was saying before about these two tables? I think I've got things a bit wrong here. Table 2 doesn't refer to the baseline at all, does it? It's more recent, is that right? It's just, which is why there's more green.
Yeah, so table 2 refers to the current quarter 1 performance benchmarked against the Dundee average. So that's where we look at the inequalities across Dundee.
It's just that the wording's a wee bit confusing. Performance in Dundee's LCPPs compared to Dundee.
So we compared each LCPP's performance with the Dundee average, but we could update the wording or put a note in for the next version to make that clearer. Ken, I'll ask Lindsay to have a look at that. Okay,
Donald.
Thanks, Ken. I was a bit confused by the 2015, 2016, 2018, 2019 switch as well. And so my first question was, is it that the legislation has changed and we've changed to reflect it, or is it that we are sort of catching up on something that we should perhaps have been doing for a little while? That was my first question.
So we're catching up. We hadn't changed it partly out of busyness, and And in some senses, I guess we felt that there had been no harm in us over-reporting rather than under-reporting, but we're tidying up our approach. So that's why it's moved. We're probably unlikely, I was going to say, we're unlikely to move it again until we clear the COVID years, because I don't think we feel it's helpful to have COVID years as baseline years in terms of a proper look at performance as well. So it'll be a few years till it moves again.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. My second question, and I'm in table 3, and when you look at questions 2 to 5, and they're all about support at home, and we look to be doing pretty well, actually, both across Scotland as a whole, as well as our family group and, indeed the other partnerships in Tayside. But then when you go to question 7, which is about supported at home, the services had an impact on improving and maintaining their quality of life, and we're pretty much at the bottom. And I'm struggling to reconcile the two, because it feels like we're doing all the right things, but people don't feel any happier at the end of it. What should we read into that as a board?
It's difficult to know. I mean, the same limitations apply to this as the question that was asked earlier around, that Sam asked around GP practices, because this is again reported from the Health and Care Experience Survey, where we have no narrative. My personal view is that probably reflects the social demographic makeup of the population, so that whilst we're working very hard to support people and we're probably mitigating some of the impacts that kind of health and social care needs and the wider kind of challenges around poverty have, that for many people they still remain in very challenging situations in terms of their day-to-day life and their day-to-day quality of life. And obviously that's reflected in the strategic plan in terms of health inequalities, wider work in the Dundee Partnership, etc. So I think there is a bit, and it probably reflects in the moving of the baseline year and things turning red, if you like, in terms of the high kind of demand profile and risk that we've seen emerge over particularly following COVID, that probably what we're doing is mitigating rather than being able to actually fundamentally improve people's lives. And I think that's obviously a concern for all of us, but that would be my personal view. But without clear feedback from the survey, it is difficult to know that. And obviously, again, we can pull in other engagement information as well. So sorry not to be able to give a clearer answer to that, but...
No, that's helpful. Thanks, Catherine.
Dorothy?
Thank you. Table 1, Catherine. I'm struggling to understand why there's a disparity across LCPPs in relation to delayed discharges. I understand that because of different levels of challenge, in different LCPPs and health challenges and things like that. I understand the disparity there, but in terms of why are people in some LCPPs not taking up bed days when others are? I mean, why is there a disparity there?
Jenny might want to comment on this. Again, I think there might be a variety of factors in play, and some of it might be around social demographic issues as well, although it doesn't completely match. So, for example, the ferry is still relatively high, and people having other resources to enable them and support them to move out of hospital and back into the community in a different way as well. But Jenny, I don't know if there's anything you would want to reflect.
No, I don't think so. I think we actually don't understand why that would be. I don't think there's not the same patterns from different LCPPs who ends up in hospital in the first place, but it doesn't ever directly connect in the way that you would expect it to if that was the case.
We could ask, so Lindsay is working with Lynn Morman to refresh the 6-monthly discharge management report that comes to PAC, so we can ask them to have a look at that within, in terms of any further analysis, Councillor McEwen, see if they could.
The other thing just to be aware of, though, is when you're working with quite small numbers, their total number of delays at any given time is really small, so it's very easy to skew something by looking at it as a percentage when actually it might only be a person difference. So I guess for me, there's a bit around, are we saying a statistic, I can't even say it at all, statistically significant variation, or if when you actually look at the hard numbers, is that just maybe 1 or 2 people of a difference and just coincidental at the time?
So why don't we just put the numbers in then in brackets or something, just to highlight that fact that.
I'll take that away and discuss it with Lindsay and look at what can be done both within this report but also the discharge management report as well. So yeah, it's a helpful question to bring up. We'll have a further look at that.
Yeah, because you don't know if you're looking at hundreds of cases, do you? Or
no, you're not looking at hundreds of cases. That's
no, I'm
sure
we're not.
Yeah.
I'm sure we're not. No.
Yeah. So it is the numbers of people who end up being registered as delayed relative to the 98% that go home without delay is really small. So you wouldn't be talking more than a few people in each area. And these areas are quite demographically different, both in terms of, like, you know, there's more people tend to have carers, for example, in the West End than some of the areas in the East End. So right. Yeah, I just wouldn't want to give you a concrete answer. There's a number of things that could explain it, but I don't know what does explain it. Okay, Jenny, that's fine. Thank you. And Catherine, I have another question on table 3, if I may, Ken.
Yeah.
Indicators 1 and 9 are reported from a biennial national survey. So we can't get short-term trends. Due to changes in survey methodology since 1516. Is anything happening to make this, you know, available in future, this information available in future, or are we just never going to have that data?
So
when will it be reported?
So the reported, like as it says, it's a reported every 2 years. So we continue to do that. We can't show long-term trends, as it says, because of a change in the survey methodology and advice from the National Statistical Office that we shouldn't be using it for long-term trends. So it is just a matter of time, unfortunately, Councillor McHugh. Assuming they do not change the survey methodology again, it will be about that pattern building up again over time, and we'll be able to start to report trends. There is one indicator where we can report trends, because I think it's the carers one. I would need to double check though and confirm to you, because the change that they made about how they calculate things didn't affect that particular indicator. So there is one where's longer. I'll check that and I'll email you to let you know which one that is. But unfortunately, it is just a case of us waiting out a few more cycles to be able to look at how that's progressing longer term, out with our control.
Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. I see no other hands, and this is for noting. Thank you.
Okay, that takes us on to item 6, Drug and Alcohol Services Indicators 2023-24 Q1. This is for noting.
Yes, Diane, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in for this, and Catherine, I'm sure we'll can pick up on where that Lindsay also is the person who pulls this one together, but she's not here. So the report really gives you some of the indicators that we agreed a number of meetings back should start to come to the meeting. Probably a few things just to highlight. Obviously, in relation to some of our kind of successes, we're seeing a significant reduction in the number of people presenting in relation to non-fatal overdose. We are fairly confident that's because we now have a range of services that support people who are identified, and we're able to start working with them, so you're perhaps not seeing the same kind of numbers of repeat people coming through. We are also still kind of battling against an increase in alcohol. Our presentations, although the numbers are starting to settle, you are starting to also equally see an increase in the number of people who are now accessing treatment for alcohol. Probably one of the areas that you would want to understand a bit better is in relation to unplanned discharges. About a year or more when we came in, we had roughly about 300 people on a waiting waiting list waiting to be seen. So those people would be registered with the services as part of our work over the last year and a half to get, first of all, introduce direct access clinics, so people weren't waiting on waiting lists. We reviewed that list, and a number of people had presented with alcohol concerns during the pandemic, who by the time we were actually speaking to them had managed to take action on their own part, and we were able to discharge. So you'll see a large number, which should really be a one-off at this particular point in time, because it was going through a large waiting list to determine where people were, what they were needing to do, and those who needed support and treatment, we got them right into the service, so that we no longer have a waiting list of that nature. In fact, very little waiting list at all in relation to the service. So that's one of the other areas. A couple of things just to pick up on. The information provided in the report highlights an increase in the use of naloxone in terms of the kits that are provided to individuals and families and friends and staff and a whole range of people. So we see an increase in that. That can be fluctuating because it depends when we order, so we can have stock which we work through. But the other thing you'll see is an increase in Buvidal, both oral and injections, which means that people who once upon a time would have been on methadone can actually have a situation where their treatment programme allows them to spend an awful lot more time without having to come to services for treatment. So it could be once a week injection, could be right up to once a month injection. The reason for highlighting both of those is we're starting to see a significant increase in cost, which is not something in relation to the service that we're budgeted for. And I think that would be the key things that I would want to highlight, but happy to take any questions, and Catherine's here to help me with the technicalities.
Yeah, although it's more expensive, buprenorphine, I think it does make a real change to the lives of service users who are not having to trek down to the chemist every day to get their methadone prescription. I haven't talked to a lot of people who are prescribed buprenorphine rather than methadone, but I spoke to a couple, and it's had quite an impact on their lives. And just one other point that really stands out on page 46, and it relates to the work done in terms of reacting to a near fatal overdose. Now, I don't know what's going on in West Lothian, where the number of days between notification and assessment is 44, but it's good to see that with a handful of other authorities, we're at 0 there, because that was a really key recommendation from the Drugs Commission, which has been fully implemented. And well done on that, because it's light and fast response to near fatal overdose. I was just wondering if naloxone is administered, and that could well be a member of the public. I guess there's no way of identifying that as a near fatal overdose, or I mean, does that count as a near fatal overdose if naloxone is administered?
Yeah, I mean, it does, but it doesn't necessarily reach our statistics unless a Scottish ambulance are called, or the police are called, or an emergency department admission takes place, or referral takes place. It is something, Councillor, that we've been talking about quite a lot, about how we make our programme of work accessible, for example, to families who may administer naloxone, but who will be encouraged not to make any further contact in terms of medical intervention. So it's certainly something in terms of Drug Deaths Task Force. There was a note that this programme is working well, but not everybody will be accessing it because of the routes in terms of referrals. You do get into a position in terms of information sharing. So the agreement around NFOD is that because it's a near fatal situation, that we effectively will share information. Without someone's consent, because it's a life and limb situation. So we need to kind of think about that. But obviously we'll then be very sensitive about our contacts. If you're looking at this coming from a family member, there may be other kind of governance issues we need to take into account in relation to that work. So yes, there's a range of consideration to be taken, but no, not included in the stats if it doesn't go near police, ambulance, or
as you would expect, really. Yeah. Sam.
Oh, thanks, Ken. Diane, page 48, indicator 7, the alcohol brief interventions. I may have asked this before. Does that include the ABIs that are done in general practice?
Yes, it does, Sam.
Okay, thank you. Because I know a lot gets done.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Ken.
No problem. Donald.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Ken. Like you, I noted that basically the same day outreach following you know, a high risk event. I thought we, you know, like you, we should just the team on getting to that sort of level, particularly when you look at other stats.
Here.
The other question that I had, and it's just trying to take a step back and what, you know, again, what's the data telling us? And what we're seeing is that for both alcohol and drug treatment, the number of referrals is reducing, but the number of individuals starting treatment is increasing. And I'm trying to get in my own mind, what's that actually telling us? Does that mean that we're overall on a downward trend, so that there are perhaps fewer people going to need alcohol or drug treatment in the future, and that at the moment we're just working through a backlog that might have built up over time? Or what should I look on that as a positive message or a negative message, I guess, is what I'm asking Diane.
So I would like to think it's a positive message. I would like to think that's what's happening, is that we're not getting people coming and being referred on multiple occasions, but actually that when people are coming either through direct access clinic, they're coming because it's a positive choice that they want to make, and therefore accessing treatment as a result of that. When we didn't have direct access clinic, what you had was a lot of referrals coming through where people then were either almost impossible to find in order to make arrangements for appointments and for treatment, or who didn't pitch up for treatment if they had an appointment, and so you went through quite a lot of non-attendees in terms of the process, and then that would result in another referral coming in further down the line and potentially another referral, and we would be to some degree kind of you know, they would join a waiting list, so that you always had a high level of referrals that might take quite a bit of time to determine whether or not they then would progress to treatment. If people are actively turning up at a clinic, that means they are there, they're given that support and they're accessing that treatment. There may be people who will come because of certain circumstances. You couldn't start in treatment right away, but you've got that active engagement right from the beginning. So the referral rate is going down because you're not getting multiple referrals, but people accessing treatment, because we're obviously working with a little bit of a lag in terms of the way the stats will be run, will be showing for a period of time an increase in the number of people actually accessing treatment, particularly for where we may still, for example, we still take referrals for people, although our preference is for people to come along to direct access. So you still got a degree of people having to be kind of found and engaged with, and then come through. So I hope that gives a good enough explanation, Donald, but we'll see those stats, I think, stable and become more kind of consistent with one another as we go on.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thanks, Diane.
Dorothy, you're up next.
I had almost an identical question to Donald, because I've written here referrals down, treatments up. And I wondered whether are people disengaging prior to treatment because of waits, Diane?
So I think that was the case previously, Councillor McHugh. I think people were disengaging prior to treatment, and that's why we had. And I think the other stat, which is probably a little bit of a telling one, is, as I described earlier, was that unplanned discharge. And that's where effectively people were never reaching the position where they were receiving treatment before in the end we would just have to discharge them. So that, I would have said, would have been the case. I think because people come to the service now, they're much more likely to engage with that treatment process.
Thanks for that. So that item is for noting. Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to item 7, Dundee Health and Social Care Partnership, Clinical Care and Professional Governance Assurance Report. You're asked to agree the recommendations.
Yeah, who's going to speak to this, please?
I'll start with this one, Ken.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew.
So this is the Clinical Care Professional Governance Report, section 2.2. We're offering an assurance level of reasonable due to the factors that we've listed in section 2.2. I'll just go through some of the key highlights. Our risk management areas, we still have a significant number of Dundee Drug and Alcohol Recovery Services risks as our highest risk within the partnership. They do remain fairly static, as the blue charts will show within there. We have started some work with the DDARS team, and they're reviewing these risks in a more formal process. The early signs are that they feel that they can start to change, but they haven't changed the scores yet because they're looking for sustained changes to be in place. But there are positive signs that some of those might start to reduce fairly soon, which is good. The risk at section A4, the recruitment challenges in the paediatric team for the nutrition and dietetics service. As you can see, that risk has gone from a 12 down to a 9, then up to a 20. We have spoken about this before within the committee. There are significant recruitment and retention issues within that team. We have good plans in place where we've been supported to get a locum into that team, and we are advertising for a Band 8A clinical lead post, and we've attracted 2 external candidates as well as an internal candidate. So the signs are good within that team for seeing an improvement, but that will take a little bit of time to put into place. Workforce risks, just to mention, there are 15 risks pertaining to the workforce across the partnership, and that reflects some of the other conversations that we've all had this morning. The adverse events, I'm not going to go into any real detail about those, but I'm happy to answer any questions on them. There's nothing particularly new or different within there. In terms of slips, trips and falls, we did have a full spotlight event on the 27th of October, which was Tayside-wide, and that links directly with, again, the performance report and the report that I'll be preparing to bring to the IJB in terms of taking some of that system-wide work forwards to address what's going on with falls in Dundee. Jumping down to the section D13, the overdue unverified events and the overdue verified events. Both of these areas, an area that we feel we need to improve upon within the partnership. The unverified adverse events, relatively small numbers, and actually this has shown quite a significant improving position over recent months, but those events should be verified within 72 hours of receiving them, and we can see that there are some on there up as far as 60 days. I went into the system yesterday, that was down to 14 days were the oldest ones, but it's something that we're seeking to improve further. The overdue verified adverse events, fairly significant numbers in here. There are 295, and the table at section D15 just shows where they're sitting across the partnership and the amount of time that they've been open. Now, there are a number of reasons why there are so many open events. A lot of that does come back to our workforce challenge, particularly with our medical staff. Some of these cases are very complex cases involving death or suicide of individuals. So we do need a very high level of review to make sure that we can follow those through. We are also dependent on other agencies, for example, the police or sometimes acute care, to provide support in moving those through. All that being said, we feel that number is too high. We're very keen to bring that down, and we're looking for a much more comprehensive and responsive method to manage those. And that's one of the factors that probably keeps us at a reasonable level of assurance. And I don't feel we could move that up while that stays at that level. Complaints have already been mentioned, but the information at E1 there is really just to show there's an improving position. And I know we've had previous reports where we've had complaints sort of 150 days plus, but the longest complaint that we have there is less than 40 days now, and Claire has already mentioned some of that data. Section E3, the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman reports. The Ombudsman were investigating, or they were looking to determine whether they wanted to investigate one of the complaints that they'd received with regard to our weight management services and the access to bariatric surgery. They've actually come back to us since the report has been submitted to say that they're not going to proceed and they don't want to investigate, and they're entirely satisfied with NHS Tayside's response and the partnership's response to that, which was very reassuring to hear. We have an external report from the Mental Welfare Commission on our Kingsway Care Centre site. It was generally a very positive report. There were 4 recommendations, and the team are working to achieve those right now. I'll just make reference to the adult support and protection inspection that we have had. The report is due out on there on the 19th of December, so we will report on the outcome of that in subsequent reports. And then the final thing I just wanted to mention at section F1, the drug-related deaths. The report for drug-related deaths in Scotland in 22 has now been published and shared. While Dundee does demonstrate the second highest rate over the 5-year period, it is showing a higher than average reduction in the percentages, which is showing an improving position in Dundee, but we absolutely acknowledge that we're still in a position where we have more deaths than we would like, but we'll continue to work with that. There does seem to be a discrepancy there's a reduction in male deaths, but there isn't an associated reduction in the female deaths. So further work is being done to explore that and work with that as well. So I'll pause there, Dan. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah,
No,
thanks for
Matthew,
that.
fine with that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I actually didn't realise until I read the papers that there actually had been a slight increase in the number of female deaths due to overdose. I just saw the high level figure of 38 in Dundee, but we have the women's hub opening soon, so hopefully that will address that. But yeah, I hadn't noticed that before, which is really really concerning. Now, number 1 this time is Dorothy.
Thank you. It's interesting that, well, it's not interesting in a good way.
No.
About the female versus male. You know, it'd be interesting if any further information can be provided about that. The one question I wanted to ask, so teensy weensy one, Ken, will only take a minute.
No rush.
Relates to where are we now? Oh yes, a mutual aid request was submitted seeking support for this team. This is the paediatric team. What is a mutual aid request, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. This is the first mutual aid request that's been submitted by an allied health profession across Scotland. But a mutual aid request is a request that goes through the Chief Executive's office to all the other chief executives across Scotland, to all of the health boards, to ask for support when we're in difficulty in terms of delivering a service. So within that service, we've reached a point where we didn't have all of the required skills to deliver all the care required for particularly the neonates and the babies and some of the inpatient care. So on the back of that request, and using our networks across the North of Scotland region, our HP director contacts and dietetic contacts, we've got support coming in from other parts of Scotland to ensure that we can provide safe levels of care or repatriate those patients to the most appropriate place.
What a good idea. That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew.
Donald.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks, Matthew. I've got 3 questions, if I may. The first one in the section on the clinical and care risk management, and then the second risk that you've got there is about negative media reporting, increasing reputational, clinical and safeguarding risk. And that, I wonder, that just felt a little bit to me like shooting the messenger, because we have, I mean, we will have reputational, clinical and safeguarding risk. And I just, I suppose I'd be more interested to know, how, you know, have we got that the right way around? But if the risk is properly framed, then how do we go about mitigating and controlling that risk? So that was question 1. My second one, I was really concerned actually to read in the violence and aggression section about risks, incidents relating to staff security at Ardler Health Centre. And as I say, I'm really concerned to hear about that. And I suppose I'm looking for some assurance that we're doing everything possible to support and protect our staff who are working there. It's, you know, it's dreadful that they should have to be putting up with that. But if they are, then what are we doing to protect them? And the third one was, again, is maybe my silly question of the month. When, I mean, you touched on it earlier about verified events and unverified events, and I'm not quite sure what we're talking about here. I mean, what's the difference between a unverified and a verified event beyond that one's been verified? So these were my 3 questions, please.
Great,
Chair,
thanks.
I'm happy to come in for the first answer. Matthew, would that be okay in terms of,
Yeah.
because it is a very specific thing which is quite historical. So the reason this risk was put in, and it was following the Dundee Drug Commission report, Donald, where Dundee became really the in the eye of the world in terms of the way that the report had painted kind of services and described the difficulties that the city were having. That meant that the information appeared regularly on the news. It became a bit of a mantra in relation to what Dundee was doing and wasn't doing, and actually almost to some degree highlighted Dundee as being exceptional, when in fact actually some of the things that were going on in the city were replicated across Scotland. But that meant that for a long time it became synonymous with poor practice and difficulties. So it was pulled through the papers over and over and over again as a result of that. And to this day we still face a number of those concerns and issues. We experienced a period after the publication of the Dundee Drugs Commission where it became very difficult to recruit staff, and in fact we had everybody withdraw from a set of interviews immediately following the Commission report. So we got into a position where actually it was starting to become difficult to deliver the services that we needed to deliver because of the reputational damage, which, whether we agree was correct or not, doesn't matter. It's the fact that actually that painted a picture which then to some degree for a period of time meant that we were unable to recruit the staff to deliver the services that we needed to deliver. And that's when that became quite an issue. It was quite a traumatic time, I think, for a lot of people, not just those who receive our services and their confidence in what then was being delivered, but also for the staff who then were trying to deliver those services. I think the MAT standards has enabled the performance in Dundee to be directly compared, apples with apples, with the rest of Scotland, and to be shown that actually both the work that's done, but also some of the approaches that were in place at the time are actually equivalent to those which sit elsewhere in Scotland in terms of some of the areas which were highlighted in Dundee as needing to be for better performance. So that's allowed us to start to have a more balanced reporting picture in relation to Dundee, but it was a very, very difficult time immediately after the report to be able to recruit staff to the service and to be able to deliver a confidence to those who came to the service because of what people were reading in the paper. So hopefully that it gives a bit of the explanation as to why it, perhaps not the best wording, but it was what was around at that time.
I was going to just ask on that, if I may, Ken, then is it about time to think about reframing that risk?
Yes. Yes, we are in a very different place with a much better ability to actually recognise where the service is in terms of performance across Scotland, and we're in the process of looking at that.
Okay, thanks. And then maybe my other two questions.
Matthew, yeah.
Yeah, certainly the situation at Ardler, we share your concerns with that, Donald. There are a number of services that have raised similar incidents and risks within the system as well that share that building. So the police are involved and have done quite a bit of work with community officers, with the staff that are there. They're looking at access to the building at the moment, that the building isn't locked. And if we were to lock it, people would need to wait outside, so that there's a balance there in terms of how we manage patients as well as protect the staff. But we've got systems like buddy systems where we can work in place. There is, and I'm not sure if this is the right terminology, but things like anti-vandal paint that's been put onto the building to prevent people climbing onto the roof and things like that. So, we absolutely recognise the very serious nature of this and the impact on staff, and we're working very closely with staff and with the police to identify and put measures in place to support and protect the staff and reduce that as much as we can. But we will, provide update reports to that as we move through. We hope that will be addressed. In terms of the adverse events, so I suppose just to very briefly explain the process. So if a member of staff raises an adverse event, they would submit it into the system. They should report that event within 24 hours of the event occurring. That's the standard. It doesn't always happen that way, but that's the standard. It should then be verified within 72 hours, within 3 days. So if we miss that, that becomes an out-of-date one. So anything that's been submitted but isn't verified, it remains unverified, and that really shouldn't happen. That should never go beyond a few days. even if somebody's on annual leave, somebody else within the service should be aware of that and should be able to pick that up and verify that. So that they're really just saying to the person that's raised it, I acknowledge that you put this in, I acknowledge that we need to do something about that, and here's the work that we'll do, and then they can move that forwards. The ones that are verified will remain in the system until they're closed. Now, if that goes for a significant adverse event review, that can take 140 days. So it's reasonable that some of them are open for that length of time, but the vast majority will close well before then. Does that answer it well enough, Donald? Or do you need something?
Yeah. I think it was the unverified versus verified bit, and it sounds a bit almost as if, you know, a member of staff's put it in, but we don't believe it until we've checked it. So it's more actually about acknowledging that a member of staff has raised an issue rather than, you know, sort of verifying it, which sounds a bit like we don't trust their own people to put things in, and I'm sure that's not the intent. So it's maybe an issue around terminology.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, sorry. Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's not about verifying it. It's about somebody more senior recognizing that it's there and making sure that the appropriate actions taken to support staff or to take action to manage the incident that's been raised. Yet it's not about verifying it and checking somebody else's work. It's about somebody more senior taking action to address it and manage it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, it's terminology. I think you're right, Donald. Yeah.
Sam.
Matthews, it was just an observation on page 59. You referred to the sustainability risk for primary care at 25. To the best of my knowledge, that has come down to 20 now. Okay. Has it not? Just pure observation.
Yeah, I'll have to check with our primary care manager and come back to that. I wonder if that's happened in the period of writing the report and submitting the report, but I will go back and check that and we'll make sure it's accurate next time. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, it's recorded as
just to agree with
sorry.
Yeah, and just to agree with Donald about I read it concerned me about Ardver, but you've reassured me that things are happening. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I see no further hands. This is for noting and also for assurance, and the recommended level of assurance is reasonable. Are we happy to accept that? Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so that takes us on to item 10, Dundee Integration Joint Board Internal Audit Plan Progress Report, and it's for noting.
Dave?
And I was going to pass on to Jocelyn, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
Jocelyn?
Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Chair. So this report sets out the progress with Dundee IJB internal audits and with any audits from the partners that are relevant to the IJB. In terms of the 22-23 plan, I can confirm now that report D6-23 operational planning has been issued, and that one will be finalised, and you'll see that at the next committee, and that completes the 22-23 plan. Moving on to the current year, at the next agenda item, we have an update on the work to improve the audit follow-up process and reporting and the governance action plan improvements. So just to confirm that we have established the complete and accurate baseline and the current position and identified all actions. So really, it's just moving on to the next step of agreeing how that system is going to work in practical terms and what the reports that the committee receives will look like. Other highlights from this year's plan: in the new year, we'll be getting started on our internal control evaluation work. I talked quite a lot about at the last committee. And also internal audit D6-24 workforce is underway. That's been undertaken by our Dundee City Council colleagues, and we're currently at the scoping stage, and we'll be getting an assignment plan out this week to agree that scope. So moving on to the partner organisation reports, there are two. The Dundee City Council one on General Ledger we've talked about already earlier in the meeting. If there are any other questions on that, I'm happy to take them back to the team and feedback out with the meeting. But because I wasn't obviously involved in that audit, I'd have to go and get clarification if there are any further questions. I did want to just highlight the NHS Tayside report and strategic planning, which is obviously relevant because of the linkages to the, the strategic commissioning plan. So that audit provided reasonable assurance that arrangements to develop an overarching strategy are being progressed. And those are now being taken forward by the NHS Tayside's new Deputy Chief Executive, Barry Jenkins. NHS Tayside has started to make those really important linkages between remobilisation, strategy development, public health priorities and the IJB strategic commissioning plans, but there is a significant way to go. A strategy risk has now been agreed, and our suggestions for the controls and assurances that should feature in that have been included. So I think in summary, and in terms of the how we conclude it in that audit, there's a recognition of that need to do things differently, but we're looking to see that coming through the governance structures with the reporting within NHS Tayside. We've agreed some big recommendations, and those are around taking stock and learning lessons from COVID, remobilisation and previous transformation programmes. That need to make sure that service changes fit in with that overall strategy, and there's that read across. Obviously, the all-important focus on finance and the finance work streams, and really just the importance of good governance and engaging with the board and process and timetable, good communication, consultation, all those things that we'll be expecting to see and we'll be keeping an eye on through our strategic planning work this year. That's all I wanted to highlight, but I'm happy to take any questions on the paper.
I thought I saw Donald moving to put his hand up there. No. Well, thanks for that. I think we're obviously happy with your report. So that's for noting. Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us on to item 11, Governance Action Plan Update, and you're asked to note the position.
Really noted. Well,
Chair, yeah, just
yeah,
kind of follows on from what Jocelyn was just describing there in terms of that audit action. So we aim to bring something back to the first pack of 2024 in terms of a new process around that.
Okay. So that's for noting. Yep, really noted.
Okay, so the last item is the attendance list, which is submitted for information and record purposes.
Thank you. And the date of next meeting is to be confirmed. I think we all probably have that in the diaries already, do we not? Or is it still to be confirmed, Arlene?
No, the timetable's still being worked on.
Ah, okay, right.
Okay.
It'll be in roughly 3 months' time anyway. Once it's usually on my birthday, if it's in February. I don't celebrate birthdays anymore, so it doesn't matter.
Good idea, Ken.
You think I'm trying to raise a laugh? I'm being serious. Well, thanks everyone for your attendance today. See you all at the IJB, and we'll all have the Christmas spirit, I'm sure. And thanks for your attendance. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Bye.